People dig music, but digging uses different techniques, ways of uncovering things. To dig means many things: to foster new appreciations of cultural objects, to uncover buried historical knowledge, to seek, possibly to extract, valuable material artifacts, and then reveal them under new conditions of value. There's the digging, the dusting off, the judgment of the archive, the reappraisal of history. Artifacts are set into new movement as they feed back into informal economies and uneven cycles of exchange. But as much as the act of digging might sound like unearthing buried things from the fields of history, digging usually means catching and releasing things already in circulation. People dig into a trajectory of cultural objects already known, somehow, in some form, by someone else. People dig music all over the place, but they dig on different ground and reshape the terrain of recorded history in their digging. Listeners replay a global archive of physical media: vinyl, CDs, cassettes, in a seemingly endless stream of commercial recordings. But who draws the line that separates the archive from the junk pile? DJs call it crate digging when they rifle through boxes of LPs, seeking a new groove, a new sample, in these old, if not always vintage, sounds. The emergent field of media archaeology has explored the ways in which the past becomes a resource for contemporary cultural subjectivity, not a fixed context from which artifacts emerge and which they represent, but an active reframing of history. To dig into the past through media helps anthropology historicize mediated cultural practices and substantiate the new relations formed in this traffic in global culture. When we dig down into these practices through a materialist focus on sound recordings, we expose deeper layers of musical globalization. Now let's switch gears and switch our ears to a kind of megamix playlist of Cambodian rock and a 30-year counterhistory of popular music as told through a handful of cassettes and their movements between Cambodia and the United States. Chan Om Da Pramoy by Rosor Sotea. It's among the best-known songs of the golden era of Cambodian pop, which ranged from the country's independence in 1953 until 1975, when the genocidal regime of the Khmer Rouge took hold of Phnom Penh, and Sura Sotea was killed, along with so many other Cambodian musicians. All recordings in the country were destroyed, so the current archive is composed of the few surviving recordings that were hidden for years or made it out of the country. We are listening to a version released in 1995 on the CD Cambodian Rocks, issued by the U.S. independent label Parallel World, on which it was simply known as A2. The compiler of the CD, an English teacher named Paul Wheeler, hadn't known the name of the song when he bought 6 cassettes on vacation in a market in Siem Reap and decided to release a mixtape of his finds. The album, cited by Rolling Stone as a marvel of cultural appropriation, was widely circulated among independent musicians in the United States, including Ethan and Zach Holzman, who had collected cassettes in Cambodia as well, and on their return sought out the vocalist Chom Namol in Long Beach, who joined them in the tribute band Dengue Fever to cover classic Cambodian tracks and write new original material in a Golden Age style. The songs on the Cambodian Rocks compilation were very well known in the Long Beach community, which is the largest enclave of Cambodian Americans in the United States. And these recordings had survived in California in ways they had not in Cambodia, though not without being changed in the course of their survival. In fact, the cassettes bought in Siem Reap had already been remixed in Long Beach by a refugee named Tung Sun, who had added electronic drums and keyboards to spruce up his worn original cassette dubs, and built an informal diasporic media empire of remixed classical recordings on his Tlang Den label. In the sound of the recordings themselves, then, we can hear the effects of these particular circulations between the US and Cambodia. Here's a playback of an original 45 7-inch vinyl of a twist recorded by Sin System. And here's the remixed Shlangden version with electronic drums and keyboards added. Other labels, such as KRPM in Stockton, California, were known for adding reverb. These added sounds and varied speeds did more than just improve the original for listeners. They served as auditory watermarks for the reissue market, revealing if a particular remix track had come from a Shlangden or KRPM collection. While the compiler of the Cambodian rock CD didn't know the names of the songs he had collected, other listeners might even be able to hear exactly where in California the recordings had been remixed and put back into global circulation. In June of 2019, I went out to search for Shlangden records with Nate Sovanet Hun, a Cambodian-American digger from Lowell, Massachusetts. Nate is the co-founder of the online digital project Cambodian Vintage Music Archive. Nate's collection, gathered over years, includes hundreds of 45 RPM discs, comprising perhaps a quarter of the Cambodian-produced vinyl that is known to exist among collectors around the world. In Long Beach, we began searching for media in the dusty shelves of a small bodega on the corner, and found a sad ending to our search in the restaurant next door. Here's Nate telling the audience about it at our recent talk at the New York Public Library.
I knew they had some old books and cassette tapes, and I was asking them for records, and they were like, you should go ask next door at the restaurant next door. It was, so, as we all know, the music industry kind of, sales all collapsed. The owner opened up a restaurant, and Long Nine Production went out of business eventually. And I went in there and asked if Mr. Tung Sun is his name, was around. I asked like two waitresses, and they looked at me funny. Like, they gave me this weird look. Like, are you who? And then they pointed me to a younger guy, which was his son. I was looking for his dad, but his dad passed away a year ago, and I had no idea, and I was just walking in there, prancing in there.
Yeah.
Very ambitious. Hey, is your dad around? Nope. Well.
While the recordings survive in various forms, the people who can tell the stories of how they were collected and changed in distribution are not here forever. Diggers, then, are as focused on the people who have these records as they are on the collections themselves. For over 10 years, the Cambodian Vintage Music Archive has digitized and recirculated recordings online to relate the story of Phnom Penh rock music before and after the Khmer Rouge, and to reconnect the world with the legacy of Cambodian popular music. As the archive has moved towards royalty-generating platforms, Oro and Nate have worked with surviving families of musicians to restore copyright when possible. This is necessary in part to revise the ersatz policy of the Cambodian government, which currently considers pre-Khmer Rouge music recordings to be common cultural property of the Cambodian people, and licenses songs globally for $10 per track. But over the past few years, the Cambodian Vintage Music Archive, in collaboration with the Bopana Center in Phnom Penh, succeeded in identifying over 100 original compositions that could be proven to be the work of the famous singer Sin Sisamuth, whose surviving family can now claim ownership over these songs. This is repatriation in a different key, which reflects as much ambivalence about institutions of media ownership and copyright and the official patronage of archives and libraries as it does about the music industries. But these stories and sounds are just the most accessible vein of a deeper flow of informal networks of collectors, amateur documentarians, underground music producers, oral historians, bloggers, downloaders, crate diggers, hoarders, and gleaners that extends around the world. People dig music and change the ground where they dig. Diggers uncover an emergent critical media subjectivity. and tune our ears to listen historically to the technological and transcultural dialogues of globalization. These are the sounds that keep history spinning into new forms. Or, as Rosa Rosotea put it, this old pot still cooks good rice.